Hi, and welcome to Time Equation, YouTube channel of a passionate watch collector. On it, I talk about watches and I showcase my personal collection. Today, we're talking about reservations. When you walk into an AD, you have an opportunity to look at and even try on watches they have in the store window or in their display cases. But there's always at least a handful of special watches they have in the back, the ones they bring out only on special occasions. And while you don't have to spend a ton of money at the AD to be able to see them, you should still come across as someone who is really into watches. As someone who would know how to appreciate taking a look at a special piece. And it really is a treat to take a look at something truly special. A single-digit limited edition is a good example of that, or a stunning precious metal piece, or a watch with a crazy long wait times. Such a watch might be available right away, or held on a reserve for someone else. And that is how I first got my chance to try on and fall in love with a Rolex Daytona. About a year ago now, around the holiday season, I went to my AD with a cunning plan to just show up and ask to buy a brand new Rolex GMT Master 2, the Bad Girl. While that bold plan did work out spectacularly, I was shown another interesting piece that day, reserved for another person all the way in the back that had a Rolex Daytona. A rare sight at any AD nowadays, and certainly a treat to look at in person, regardless of the material it's made in. Truly a stunning watch, and definitely a piece you can fall for at the very first sight. The one to haunt your dreams and taunt you by being just out of reach. Hallmarks of a developing watch collecting disease, I admit, but everything on that watch looked amazing to me. Its perfectly symmetrical chronograph complication, the matching dial, bezel, and strap colors, the warmth of the shine white gold gives when the light hits it just right, the way its case bends and plays with the light on the curved lugs and sides. How could you not like it? It is just brilliant. But alas, on hold for someone else and unlikely to find its way onto my wrist ever again. That small taste in what it's like to own one, it's all I'm getting. A wrist shot as a souvenir to remember the feeling will have to do for now. However, plans change, life gets in the way and reservations do expire. So just in time for it to become a birthday present for myself, I got a message from my authorized dealer. The Daytona is mine if I want it. Which was perfect. This was going to be it. The 10th piece in my collection. One heavy hitter and the piece to fill the last spot in my watch box. Lies we tell ourselves are most amusing, are they not? But more on my ever-growing collection another time. Now, let's talk about this amazing watch. Daytona was born to race, to be a companion of a professional racing car driver. And as such, its design features remain virtually unchanged since its inception in 1963. Watch made for racing must be a chronograph, and it must have a tachymeter bezel, because only by combining the two could a driver have its average speed measured. And before the time of computers, this was exactly how it was done. All analog, with machines both on the track and off it. However, the watch wasn't always called a Daytona. That came about 1 year after its initial design. Rolex was keen on having it named Le Mans, after the famous 24-hour endurance race. But that name didn't stick, and as Rolex expanded into the American market, the watch got renamed to Daytona, from one famous 24-hour endurance race to another. With racing in its blood, the Daytona set out to conquer the world. Not immediately, of course. It was famously unpopular for quite a while. You couldn't even give it away. Until a guy named Paul Newman was gifted one by his wife in 1972. Being a famous actor and racing champion himself, Paul Newman loved his Daytona. So in this case, the man made the watch, and it became as cool as the man wearing it. Suddenly, everyone wanted one, even though the watch didn't change, the demand for it did. Paul Newman's Daytona, which he wore constantly until the day of his passing, was sold at a Phillips auction house in 2017 for an astonishing $17.8 million, breaking a record for highest price ever paid for a mechanical watch at an auction. Not to be outdone, other Daytona watches with the same dial phase became affectionately named as the Paul Newman Daytonas, all fetching high market premiums, depending on their condition of course. Now looking at mine specifically, and starting with the most obvious, its case. The material it is made out of is 18 karat white gold, forged in the Rolex-owned foundries, which, unlike traditional white gold, is white throughout the metal, so even if the case gets scratched, its color will remain the same. You see, traditional white gold has a more yellowish color naturally. To make it white, rhodium plating needs to be applied. That gives it a more desirable platinum white kind of an appearance. But unlike the Rolex white gold blend, the natural yellow color does come back when the rhodium plating wears off, which is bound to happen on account of plating being very thin or gold being a soft metal that scratches and dings easily. Either way, if you decide to buy a white gold watch, go for this type of white gold, blend that's elsewhere in the jewelry industry referred to as grey gold. White gold is a more subdued precious metal. It doesn't scream, "look at me," like the yellow and to some extent rose gold does. Unless you're in the know, you'd easily mistake it for stainless steel. But put it on, and the weight alone will tell you that you're wearing something other than steel. The feeling of wearing a heavy watch is definitely part of the appeal. The case is 40 mm in diameter. When measured conventionally from 9 to 3 o'clock positions, it is executed in high polish, and its profile is elegant, featuring curved surfaces with a touch of beveling. Beautiful slide from any angle you choose to look at, each revealing an interesting new detail worth focusing on. On the 9 o'clock side, you're treated with curves and masterful polishing. From the 6 o'clock, you'll notice the extended case profile with the racing stripe aesthetics. From the 3 o'clock, you'll gaze at the crown, pushers, and their polished caps. Finally, from the 12 o'clock position, you'll spot the way its ceramic bezel sits on top of the case, and you'll enjoy the sight of its sloped sapphire glass. This phenomenally executed case sits perfectly on most wrists. Being a chronograph, it has two pushers that protrude from the case side. The start-stop and reset functions they offer are protected with a screw-down cap. That enhances the water resistance of the case, up to 100 meters, making this watch swimmable should you choose to take it in the water with you. I'll be perfectly honest, the pushers are a bit of a hassle to undo, especially just before using the chronograph, so timing things with the Daytona does take a bit of planning ahead. It's not a spur-of-a-moment type of a thing as it is with most other chronographs, but they are an iconic part of the Daytona design. The watch does look better when the pushers are screwed down too, so it is best to keep them tightened until you really want to use the chronograph. Racing-style chronographs typically have a tachymeter scale as well. This graduated ring running alongside the dial is used to measure average speed over a standard kilometer or a mile. And on this watch, it is executed as a single piece, glossy black, ceramic bezel, which is laid on top of the case. Ceramic material makes the bezel highly scratch resistant, and its longevity is only prolonged by the platinum coloring used on the bezel markers. This bezel aesthetics plays well with the strap and the subdial registers. From all the color and material combinations available for this watch, and they are quite a few, I like this mashup the most. The dial is certainly the star of the show. Rolex lists this dial as steel and black in its technical specification, but that description simply doesn't do it justice. It is jam-packed with details that might elude the eye during a quick glance. The steel is executed as a sunburst with the fine grooves that capture the light. There's a dynamic feeling to the dial surface, and it looks different depending on the angle the light hits it. The black is reserved for the sub-registers. They are ever so slightly sunken, and their black is flat, matte black, but only at the sub-dial centers. The edges, which are graduated, also have a groove texture. Below the white leather print, you'll find the concentric circle patterns etched in. They are hardly noticeable, but they do elevate the overall look. There are 3 sub-dial registers, 2 for the chronograph related functions, tracking laps, minutes and hours on the 3 and the 9 o'clock positions respectively, with an additional constant running second sub-register at the 6 o'clock position. That little tidbit is how you can discern an in-house Rolex caliber. from the zenith movement they used prior to designing their own. It is a tidbit I personally love, because it makes the dial symmetrical. It also makes the Daytona stand out in the sea of watches that have the running seconds hand at the 9 o'clock position. Just above it, with a small splash of red color, the word Daytona is written on the dial. It is a very nice touch and a fan favorite. On the outskirts of the dial, you'll find the minute track. Clear and crisp print Rolex uses makes reading the time a breeze. Hand-applied hour markers made from white gold are filled with chromolite luminescence. Few of them do stand out. The markers at the 3, 6 and 9 o'clock positions are slightly smaller and are square-shaped, while the rest of them point like arrows to the center of the dial. In typical Rolex fashion, the 12 o'clock marker is made distinct, and in this case it is an applied company logo, made from white gold as well. Below the fine pointed crown is something that can only be described as some serious reading material. There's frankly a ridiculous number of lines of text. So given that they've gone through the trouble of printing them, let's decipher what they mean. From the top, Rolex. Okay, brand name, that is normal. Oyster Perpetual. Oyster meaning that the watch is an oyster case. Put plainly, water resistant. Perpetual meaning the watch movement is an automatic, self-winding one. Superlative chronometer. Chronometer meaning that the movement is operating within COSC specification, with an allowed accuracy deviation between -4 and +6 seconds a day, and a myriad of other parameters that must satisfy to qualify that certification. But this is a Rolex superlative chronometer, meaning that Rolex takes a COSC-tested movement, case it up, and then test it to ensure it performs to their own specification of ±2 seconds a day, which is not only impressive, but also included as a part of its 5-year warranty. So if your watch behaves outside the declared superlative range, you are well within rights to send it in for a warranty-covered service. And that is a Rolex quality statement. Moving on. Officially certified, meaning that the Swiss Chronometer Testing Institute official was present during the watch movement certification. An official certified the movement. And finally, Cosmograph. For some very odd and unexplainable reason, a true head-scratcher that one is, you see, Rolex did intend to brand this watch as Cosmograph at first, and wanted to associate this particular model with the 60s space race. But the watch never got its space certification. It never actually went to space. NASA famously picked the Omega Speedmaster for this task. So the question is, why does a watch that never went to space still calls itself a Cosmograph? Perhaps Rolex is being stubborn, or maybe hopeful. But what is certain is that the officially certified part doesn't refer to the Cosmograph. On top of that wall of text you can find 3 watch hands. Hour and minute hands are both well loomed, with quite a bit of attention to detail, making it easy to discern between the two when the watch is loomed. They also evoke that racing stripe aesthetic, design language used consistently throughout. As opposed to them, the Chronograph seconds hand isn't loomed, but it is beautifully executed as a single, polished block of white gold resembling an arrow. And I just love that. The movement sitting just behind the dial is a spectacular one. Caliber 4130 is an in-house developed chronograph movement, one with a vertical clutch for precise and smooth actuation, no jump or stagger when using the chronograph, and a very satisfying, refined feeling when pushing the buttons. It is also distinct enough to be recognizable even with a blindfold. The movement operates at 28,800 vibrations per hour, or 4 Hz. It self-winds as it is an automatic with a bidirectional rotor, which is almost completely silent when winding the watch. Finally, the power reserve is around 70 hours, allowing the watch to be put down over the weekend and still have it ticking on Monday. The watch is 100-meter water resistant as mentioned before, and the crown it uses Rolex calls a triplock crown. Multiple rubber gaskets it consists of make the case sturdy, enhancing the water resistance of the watch. One of these gaskets is even visible when the crown is unscrewed. You can easily recognize the triplock system on a Rolex watch by the 3 little dots on the signed crown. The crown itself is protected from being sheared off, if hit accidentally, with a set of crown guards. On the other end of the case, you'll find the bracelet. Rolex calls the bracelet on this Daytona OysterFlex. It is made of a single piece vulcanized rubber with a titanium strip in its core. Those materials make the whole experience of wearing one feel comfortable and solid. Rubber, with a set of bellows underneath, ensures that the bracelet hugs the wrist well, and its titanium core sturdies the rubber, ensuring that the bracelet keeps its shape. But there's a downside. The bracelet can be resized, or shortened by cutting, as we typically do with a rubber strap, so you have to have it fitted as close as it can possibly get. Micro adjustments past a certain point are done through the clasp. There are 3 micro adjustment divot positions to do just that. And there's also a Rolex EasyLink adjustment system. It gives you extra 5mm of expansion to play with, completely tool-free, extremely useful during the summer days when the wrists swell a bit. Finally, the bracelet closes shut with a safety clasp. The beak and the hook system it uses ensures that you have to gently pull them apart. Opening and closing the clasp still feels very solid and precise. And the entire mechanism is made from white gold. So you get a good chunk of the precious material, even if the bracelet is an OysterFlex one. Daytona hits all the right notes for me. It's a casual wearing sports chronograph that you can just put on and take anywhere. I find myself reaching for it frequently when choosing the watch to wear that day. Black goes well with everything, so color-wise it's never a wrong option. And due to its color, I find it to be just a bit understated, almost blending with the outfit. I love that subdued, almost invisible type of a statement such a watch makes. If you know what this watch is, you'll notice and appreciate it. Otherwise, you won't think twice about it. I see myself enjoying this piece for a very long time. Following this Daytona, my collection grew rather quickly. Every few months I'd buy a new watch that was different from the last. Today, my collection has grown to over a dozen pieces, each with its own story and a set of quirks. I invite you to follow my watch collecting journey by subscribing to my channel. That way you'll get notified and discover the watch I've chosen next. Until then.